the most interesting thing I hear from patients who have pneumonia, lung problems, sick, coughing, is that when they start using nebulized peroxide and iodine, their lungs open up, their oxygenation gets better if they're measuring that, their breathing gets better, their wheezing gets better. Sometimes it doesn't help. That's on the rarer side. I don't recall anyone telling me an adverse effect from doing a dilute solution of hydrogen peroxide.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Holistic Navigator podcast, where we believe in the body's capacity for self-healing if it's given the proper nutrients and care it deserves. My name is Brian Strickland. I'm the producer of the show, and here with me in the studio, as always, is your host, Ed Jones. On today's episode, we're speaking once again with Dr. David Brownstein. Dr. Brownstein is a board-certified family physician. He's one of the foremost practitioners of holistic medicine and is the medical director of the Center for Holistic Medicine in West Bloomfield, Michigan. On today's episode, Dr. Brownstein is going to discuss nebulizing food-grade hydrogen peroxide. And if you haven't heard of this before, it isn't really that well known, but it is something that he's used in his practice for many years. He's going to give us the whys and hows and some of the results that he's seen in his own practice. Well, that's it for me, everyone. Just a heads up, we did run into a small audio issue on this episode, but all the information is still there for you to hear. Let me go ahead and get things started and introduce your host, Mr. Ed Jones.
Thank you, Brian, and welcome everyone to the Holistic Navigator again. We're over 100 podcasts. I'm very, very thrilled to again be joining you on my life passion, which is to empower people in avenues to help them in their health on all parts to this puzzle. I don't care if it's from hair loss to constipation to very serious conditions. And today I have I think he's a hero. I mean, I can just use whatever word I want. I met this physician probably 12 to 14 years ago in Nashville at a medical conference. I certainly am not a physician myself, but I've schooled myself for 4+ decades in every avenue of nutrition and medical world that would lean toward my philosophies of self-healing. And today we have Dr. David Brownstein. Welcome to Vital Health. Welcome to the Holistic Navigator. I have a radio show called Vital Health, so I'm getting confused here. Welcome to the Holistic Navigator, Dr. Brownstein.
Well, thank you for having me.
We talked one time before, and it was on January 10th of 2020 on my podcast, and the title was A Holistic View of Thyroid Function, Iodine, and Blood Pressure with Dr. Brownstein. That has been one of the more listened to podcasts in the last year and a half. As I spoke to just a second ago, a lot of water's gone under the dam since that time, and I want to focus on something that is modestly censored, but it's been something that I have been had experience with even 25 years ago. I have a local physician here. His first name's Charles. You probably know him. And he would do IV hydrogen peroxide for me and other patients before he was made to stop doing that many years ago. And I have always been intrigued with the potency, value, and power of food-grade hydrogen peroxide. And I know that you in your clinic have been using it. And I love something I saw on TikTok that I was speaking to my staff of 27 people last, during the first lockdowns. I said, I have lived my whole life for this moment. And the experience that I gained from 40 plus years as far as entrepreneur, management, and health, I feel like was all to prepare me for this. And I think I heard you say something similar to that on TikTok. And I just value your courage, because it does take courage to fight this battle, and we are going to win in the end. Truth always does. So without me wasting any more time, let you start talking about your experience and your advice for people who want to learn about how to nebulize food-grade hydrogen peroxide.
Well, I've been using this technique for over 25 years for treating viral infections and during influenza season. And it doesn't matter whether it's flu or another viral infection. And what we've seen is people are having breathing issues, get better. They can breathe better. Their lungs seem to open up. They seem to oxygenate better, and our patients don't go to the hospital and don't get pneumonia at anywhere near the reported rates every flu season when they get sick with flu and other flu-like illnesses.
And we know that peroxide has been around a very long time. In fact, I think just me looking into it just slightly before this, it began in the early 1900s. And I looked on PubMed about an hour ago. There are 91,583 references to peroxide on PubMed, and breast milk contains peroxide. And so I think people all know about peroxide for pouring it on skin issues and seeing the bubbling. But I know from my personal experience of just listening to the many people who are going to share experiences with me. I work 6 days a week. I'm talking to hundreds of people. The ones who've embraced your protocol for nebulizing during this, I will call it under the weather epidemic that we are experiencing. Don't want to get censored, at least on my end, by using the wrong words, but I think people listening will know what I'm speaking about, have fared so much better if they do it in the appropriate time frame. So obviously, I think you've done a paper on that with 107 patients that you've actually published in regard to that. But of course, your vast experience speaks tons about the truth about the power of peroxide. And of course, without me and you having to say it, we know this will never be mainstream. One is profit. Peroxide is one of the least expensive products you could possibly use. And I know that, even there's shortages even sometimes now I'm seeing of nebulizers, because obviously you are, and some of your hero partners are educating people. But someone listening right now and they have an interest in this because, and one, you say this constantly, I've read many of your things, we need to be prepared. We don't wait until we're truly under the weather, feeling horrible to try to accumulate the knowledge. You won't have the mental capacity to do it because you're feeling so bad. So I encourage people, always get your toolkit ready. One of those toolkits is a nebulizer and food-grade peroxide. Where does a person start from there?
Well, you're right on that. And, we found out during this COVID crisis that, you want to be scrambling when you're sick. You want to have everything at hand. And, I first ran across peroxide when I was taking an oxidative medicine course, 25, I don't remember how many years ago, a long time ago. And, started using it, and it is truly through this COVID mess that we're in. I've had a protocol that I've used for patients with, high dose vitamin A, C, D, and iodine, and then nebulized peroxide and iodine, and then IVs of vitamin C and peroxide and if you need more. And out of all that therapy that has kept, we're over 700 patients now. You're right. I wrote that peer-reviewed paper of 107 patients. And the success we've had with it. But all those patients, and going back 25 years, the most interesting thing I hear from patients who have pneumonia, lung problems, sick, coughing, is that when they start using nebulized peroxide and iodine, their lungs open up, their oxygenation gets better if they're measuring that, their breathing gets better, their wheezing gets better. Sometimes it doesn't help. That's on the rarer side. I don't recall anyone telling me an adverse effect from doing a dilute solution of hydrogen peroxide. And, you asked about people doing it at home, and my suggestion is to find a holistic doctor who is literate in oxidative therapies like hydrogen peroxide and ozone, and can help work with you on it. I don't think people should just willy-nilly do things at home. And when I talk about nebulizing peroxide to my colleagues, I don't mean nebulizing the over-the-counter peroxide, because there's some preservatives and some things in there that probably aren't the best to be nebulizing. It's using a food-grade peroxide. And the food-grade peroxide comes at different strengths out there, in the world. And there's different manufacturers of it. And you got to make sure you have a good brand of it. And it's a much cleaner form of peroxide. But however you do it, the formula I've been using is a 0.03% peroxide solution in sterile normal saline. And it's a very dilute solution of peroxide. And then I have patients put 1 drop of 5% Lugol's iodine into that nebulizer well, and then nebulize with it. So people can buy nebulizers. You can buy them online. You can buy them, some drugstores have them. they're not that expensive. A nebulizer is anywhere from, $35 to $70, a good jet nebulizer. I don't recommend a handheld nebulizer for nebulizing anything. They're not strong enough. And I found out during the COVID crisis, patients who used handheld nebulizers didn't get the same benefit as the desktop jet nebulizers that sit on the desk, sit on the countertop, they plug in, and that's what puts it. What a nebulizing means is it puts liquid into small fluid particles so you can breathe them in. And so it puts a stream of air through that liquid product that becomes sort of it's not a gaseous state, but close. And that's what you're breathing in is, the small, particles that are in liquid form. And, it's nebulizing peroxide, hydrogen peroxide, and food grade peroxide, and Lugol's iodine, 5% Lugol's iodine is very inexpensive stuff. None of this costs a lot of money. You can nebulize peroxide for 3 months and spend maybe, every day, and do it a couple times a day and probably spend less than $100 for the whole thing. And that's from buying a new nebulizer. Once you buy the nebulizer, you can just, either mix up, we mix up solution for our patients sometimes, or, whatever. And, then it costs, for 3 months, probably $40, $30, something cheap, nothing much. But it's a pretty effective, inexpensive therapy. And you're right. That's why it's not going to be patented. And that's why, Big Pharma will never come out with it.
So if someone is under the weather, feeling really, really, really poorly, how many times a day do you normally recommend someone to do the nebulizer?
Well, I've been having people nebulize this 0.03% dilute hydrogen peroxide and iodine solution. If they're sick, I have them do it every hour till they're better, waking hour till they're better. As they get better, they can start laying off with it and then just sort of gradually, run their course with it. Now, in the middle of the COVID crisis, I had a lot of patients that I would tell to just nebulize when you get home from somewhere that you think you might have been, exposed. Because theoretically, the peroxide and iodine both have antiviral properties to it, and hopefully they can decrease the viral load in the throat and oral pharynx and nasal pharynx. I can't quote you any direct studies with that, but in vitro, hydrogen peroxide and iodine both have antiviral properties to it and are very effective antiviral properties. You mentioned peroxide. Where did you tell me you read that it was found in the body?
Well, in the body, breast milk contains a pretty good amount of peroxide.
Well, so do the lungs, so do the sodas. Every cell in the body is constantly exposed to peroxide. It's produced all over the body in every cell. And the immune system uses peroxide to fight foreign invaders. Iodine helps the white blood cells, fight foreign invaders and helps the white blood cells produce more peroxide. It's everywhere in the body. The lungs have a huge amount of peroxide, especially when they're under stress, fighting something. So I found it incredibly effective. I found it effective for COPD, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. For asthma, peroxide sometimes helps people. I think it's worth a try because it's pretty safe in a dilute solution. But asthmatics, in an acute asthma attack, they might need medical therapy over peroxide. But I have asthma, and what I find is if it's allergy induced or just not an asthma attack, an outright full-blown asthma attack, peroxide works wonderfully to help decrease the wheezing and to open up my lungs and take that tight feeling away.
I love that. And for people who are not familiar with Lugol's, it is an old remedy of iodine that I do take every day. A lot of it based on learning from you over my years. And we did this podcast on, like I said, January 10th, 2020 with Dr. Brownstein on thyroid health. So you can learn more about Lugol's if you just go back to that podcast on my site. And now, Dr. Brownstein, again, we're in the world of crazy censorship and things. And I want to have people be able to access some written good information. Do you have a certain site or place that you can recommend? I found one earlier, but I want to hear what you got to say.
Well, number one, I've written books on all these things, and written 16 books. It's on my website, drbrownstein.com. And, I have the peroxide information would be in my ozone book and my virus book. I wrote a book on holistic approach to viruses based on my treatment during the COVID pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
And I get my information all over the place, and through different sites. But at least I have all the books cited. I have all the books referenced, and I just write about what works in my practice because I'm in the trenches. I'm in the trenches. I've been in the trenches for COVID since day one. I never closed my office. Never, we treated patients, and we've treated them before we knew our therapy would even work. We were hoping it was going to work, and it worked. And it's the same thing we've done. Nothing has changed, and nothing. Over 25, nothing has changed. COVID has responded. People suffering with COVID have responded the same as people suffered from other viral illnesses. I think that I don't think we have a cure for COVID. Never did. I claim to help people's immune system function better when it's stressed in times of illness.
Well, the thing is, and I've told many people this, and I speak a lot in public venues, and of course, having to watch. I'm not super frightened about being open about my opinions, and sometimes I do get on roles where I probably speak a little too much. But I say this to the fact that intentionally there's an agenda to create fear, because when you're fearful, then you become a victim, and when you're a victim, you become susceptible to the powers to be to control you. And the thing is, the word virus is right now terrifying people. Before this time frame, it didn't really terrify, but we've been so brainwashed by the media and all of the CRAP that we're being told constantly, morning, noon, and night. The thing is, and I think these studies show that maybe each person in this whole world has about 3 viral infections a year. Let's just say we only have 1 viral infection a year. I'm 64 years old. That means I've had 64 virus infections. There's not a medicine to treat any of these. I've lived through every one of them. Anyone who's listening to this podcast, you can at least say every year you've had one, and probably 2 to 3 times a year. You've made it through every one. The real sadness, and you I know would agree to this, is the so many people who are not living today, not because they didn't take a vaccine. It wasn't because they got COVID. It's because the treatment that is being offered is simply not effective, and it continues on. And that's the sad part of this, when we know there are much better options. I have probably heard stories of at least 300 to 400 people, because people share a lot with me. And the ones who, number one, and I think you'll say this, we have to start this thing early. You can't wait till day 10 and you're spiraling. You have to start. And I say, day 3 would be like day 3 to 4 at the latest. You feel the same way?
Absolutely. That's why you want to be prepared early and have a nebulizer and have, solution ready to use if you need it. So you're not having to scramble for it. And I saw the same thing with COVID as you just described. The people we started early did much better than the people who had settled in and we were trying to play catch up. I agree with you about the fear. Fear causes people to do things they wouldn't necessarily do to get that fear to go away. And the powers that be have done a good job at creating an environment of fear over an illness that, with early treatment, and there's various early treatments. I mean, my protocol is one early treatment. Dr. Zelenko has his own protocol. Dr. McCullough has, and frontline doctors know that, there's different ways to support the immune system, to treat the body, to use medications to treat viral illnesses. And, versus what we did in this crisis was just tell everybody stay home, wait till you can't breathe, and then go to the emergency room where too many people died. And it was really, when postmortem is written on this crisis, it's not going to be a pretty read.
No, it won't. And I think, I believe solely that, truth ends up winning in the end. Don't know how long that will be before truth bubbles up to the point of the tipping point. But you can't keep hiding the lies forever. You just can't. And history is going to write this story in who knows what way, but it won't be written in the way that people think right now it will be, which is vaccinations are going to fix this problem. It can't seem to ever have fixed a coronavirus, and I don't think it ever will, just because of the nature of that virus. Now, we'll say, and things can change weekly as far as censorship, but I did Google Spirit of Change and your name and peroxide, and it did come up with a chart. And I know in your books, I love your books. You're such a great author, and I encourage everyone to really delve into it, especially if you have thyroid issues and you want to learn about this peroxide and you want all these things. And the other thing is, I get your newsletter. There's not a better freaking newsletter out there by any healthcare professional, physician, or naturopath that I ever could recommend than Dr. Brownstein's newsletter. But the Spirit of Change, if you Google that with your name and peroxide, has the chart on how to dilute it with this normal saline. And I know you say in there, it's very important to have the right saline, because you can't just put distilled water in here. So people who are listening, you got to know what you're doing if you don't have a healthcare professional like yourself who can help guide you. And we know that, many parts of the country simply don't have the people who have the experience like you. They may actually be open somewhat, but they don't have your experience. So we're trying to empower them the best they can be at this point. But I'm also like you. I encourage people to build a team of professionals who are skilled in the belief that the body has magic capacities to heal itself, but only if we service it, supply it, and build it up with the right natural nutrients and sometimes drugs. I mean, I think you've written it. You actually didn't even use ivermectin in most of your patients. I'm not opposed to some drugs. I think ivermectin is probably a choice, a good one, but you don't even have to do that. Obviously, you've done it without it, right?
We have not used ivermectin. That was never part of our protocol for treating viral illnesses over 2.5 decades. And I think it's necessary for this one. I've read studies in ivermectin. I think there's some good studies with it, and others have reported good results with it, which is not what we've done.
Well, I think people have, if they're listening, they have a really good feel for how to begin this path, this process. Get the nebulizer, get the food grade peroxide. Never get the drugstore. It is full of some chemicals that you just would not want to ingest, especially breathing into your lungs. And swishing in your mouth's one thing, but not breathing into your lungs. You've talked about the frequency, when to start it, how to start it. The chart, again, on your books can give the chart of dilutions with the saline, or again, if it stays on internet, Spirit of Change had the great chart. Sadly, Mercolas, of course, as we all know, has removed or been forced to remove so much or all of his websites except for 2 days that he posts right at this point. So we can't go back and look at his stuff that he wrote about you. I mean, he certainly loves you to death also. So hopefully we've empowered people to this level of at least the peroxide. Last question, if you have just a little snippet on it, what are you recommending for these long haulers? Because what we know is that a lot of people who both took the shot and or got the virus is continuing with symptoms, not sick, but they're having the brain fog, the fatigue, sometimes the mucus in the lungs, all kind of symptoms. They just are not fully recovered. What advice are you giving your patients on that, Dr. Brownstein?
Well, first off, reports of long haulers from COVID are anywhere from about 20% to 40% of people who recover from COVID are suffering from some kind of health symptoms. Now, in our practice, it's about 2 to 3%. So we're finding that our approach gives us very few long haulers, and what we're doing with those that do develop long haul is treat them with IV nutritional therapies. We find high dose vitamin C IVs and proper detoxification and just immune system support. And just find out what's imbalanced in the body and correct those imbalances. And then have patients do, this is a two-way street. Patients need to do their end of the thing. They need to exercise. They need to move. They need to drink water, adequate amounts of water. They need to cut sugar out of their diet. That's the big thing. Cut sugar and refined carbohydrates, because sugar paralyzes the white blood cells for up to 4 to 5 hours. So how are people going to get over these illnesses if their immune system constantly is whacked by eating too much sugar and refined carbohydrates?
Again, Dr. Brownstein, I cannot thank you enough for your life-saving information and the fact that you've just truly empowered people for both what to do during and also those many people, like you said, 20 to 40% are talking and feeling the long hauling effects. I love, and I say this constantly to people, is what you just stated, which is when you consume sugar, your immune system kind of goes neutral for about 4 hours. It doesn't have the abilities that it normally has. That doesn't mean we live in a cave and you can't have a brownie every now and then. But to do it for breakfast, lunch, and supper, and so many people's breakfasts contain a lot of sugar. And so again, looking at what you're eating, looking at what you're drinking, looking at your lifestyle, your exercise, the purity of the air, how much sunshine are you getting? It all goes back to this. It's not even a magic formula. It's common sense, but we've lost it, especially the medical professionals today just simply don't have any value connection to the natural pharmacy within us and getting back into the harmony of life, the nature, the place we came from that built us to be resilient, strong, and your health's not based on the next prescription. It just simply isn't. And I'm just again very, very proud to say that I have you on my podcast. It builds my credibility wonderfully, and I just know that you are going to be doing this for as long as you can, and the same with me. And so, is there any last words of wisdom you'd like to leave the listeners?
Well, I mean, what I'd like to say is, you need to it's a two-way street with working, as I see it. My relationship with my patients is I'm on the sidelines. I'm on the side of the street yelling, go left, go right, go straight. They're behind the wheel. So, in driving that car correctly down the road, you need to eat better, keep sugar down in your diet, drink water, exercise, do the basics. And then if you do the basics, when you get sick with something, some kind of viral illness or bacterial illness, your immune system's ready to fight back, and it just needs a little bit, maybe a little bit more support to help it along. Versus someone, 2/3 of our country's overweight, 1/3 is obese. We have diabetes, way too much diabetes. And then when they get sick with these viral illnesses, they're fighting back against this huge inflammatory state the body's already in going into the viral illness. And so I think this should be a wake-up call, and I wrote about that in my virus book, that COVID should be a wake-up call on how hard we've been hit with it, that we're just not a healthy country right now. And, it's more than just nebulizing peroxide. It's taking care of ourselves and getting ready for when we are under stress. There's always a time, nothing's too late. You can always make changes if you haven't done so well up to now, or if you're doing now, just tighten things up a little bit. You don't have to bad health. You don't have to settle for feeling lousy. You don't have to settle for being brain fogged and tired all the time. We are designed by our maker to have good health, good energy throughout life.
I love that. And you speak such good common sense, but it seems to have been thrown out the window these past, especially year and a half. I have great hope, great promise that, despite all the efforts of censorship, here we are. We're talking to a person like yourself. We are going to spread this word because it is. And again, you're on TikTok. I love that. And so your website, again, is for more information and to purchase your books. What is your website again?
It's www.drbrownstein.com.
Lovely, lovely. And I just so supremely thank you again, Dr. Brownstein, for joining me on The Holistic Navigator. And I'm sure we'll talk in the next 6 months to a year again. And your gifts are invaluable to the people that are listening, which is not just in the United States, but also in other countries. So much praise to you. And, the world asks us every single day, do you have courage? Well, I can tell you, people listening, Dr. Brownstein has got a basket full of courage. So thank you for joining me on The Holistic Navigator, Dr. Brownstein.
Oh, thank you for having me. I look forward to do it again.
All right. You take care of yourself. We need you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you, listeners, and we'll be hearing from you and listening next time on The Holistic Navigator. I've got 3 podcasts already in play, ready to go. So we got a lot of work we've done, and we got a lot more work to continue on. And I love what I'm doing, and please email us if you have any questions or comments. Thank you. This is Ed with The Holistic Navigator.
The information on this podcast and the topics discussed have not been evaluated by the FDA or anyone of the medical profession and is not aimed to replace any advice you may receive from your medical practitioner. The Holistic Navigator assumes no responsibility or liability whatsoever on behalf of any purchaser or reader of these materials. The Holistic Navigator is not a doctor, nor does it claim to be. Please consult your physician before beginning any new health regimen.